Okay, students, this is lesson 1.6. This is a super duper important lesson. I can't stress enough how important it is for you to watch this video and then try this on your own. Make sure that you understand how to debug your programs because these are all the questions that I usually get. It's about debugging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through your lab, and then I want you to, the lab for 1.6, and I want you to do this on your own and play with it. Go beyond what it's asking you to do, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to show you a little bit more than what the chapter shows you, of course, because I don't think they go in depth into debugging. So I'm opening first time debugging project. Maybe not. There I am. And in this project, you're going to have warnings, you're going to have errors, um, you're going to have errors, compiler errors, you're going to have runtime errors. So we're going to talk about what all that means. Okay, so here in our, when you open this particular file, it automatically has, if you look up here, it says it has 2 errors. These are what we called compiler errors. So this is not runtime. This is when you try to build. So if you go over here to product or command B for build, and you try to build the program, it says build failed and it has 2 errors. This first error has a little exclamation point, and what the exclamation point means is that it's going to give you what, I guess, like a definition of what the error is, but it doesn't try to give you a solution because it doesn't really know the solution. And so it says expected parameter name followed by colon. So here, notice this says view did load. View did load is what we call a function. All functions, like here's view did load, have an open and a close parentheses afterwards. Because when you have a function, you have to pass values to the function sometime. For example, when you have a calculator, you have you have functions like the square root function. Key, it's a little key, right, that you press. So you give it a number like 64 and then you press the square root key. That's a function key, and what it does is it gives you, you're passing it the 64 and it gives you back the square root of 64, which is 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. So this doesn't really tell you what the problem is. The problem really is just you have to know that it has to have a parentheses. And if you don't know that, then it's going to be really hard to fix the problem. And these are just things that you're going to learn as you look at code. The more you look at code, the more you'll see these little problems. Anytime you look at errors, you have to look at things like, did I spell the name correctly? Case matters when it comes to your names. Do I have the correct keywords? Like func and override are keywords. Everything that's in pink on my screen is a keyword. So is that in the right color? If it's not pink for me, because that's the way I set it up, then I misspelled something. Now here, this particular error, if you look here on the right-hand side where my mouse is pointing, is a little dot, I guess you could say. You have a red circle with a white dot. And when it gives you that kind of error, it actually tries to give you a solution for the error. So it says use of unresolved identifier, some METHO. So if I click on that dot, that circle, it says, did you mean some method? So basically it's saying, if you look over here, it says some method has a D at the end, and here it doesn't have the D. So it's smart enough to say, oh, he or she probably forgot the D. So you want to say, yes, I meant some method. So you click on fix and boom, it fixes it for you. And now it is happy. And there are no errors. Now that it fixed the errors, now it found some, what we call here, warnings. Now, if you have a warning, you can actually run the program. It will build with a warning. And let me just show you. So I'm going to go back to product. I'm going to build it. And okay, so it did not, it stopped. Let's see, we go back to, oh, there we go. Build succeeded. Oof, that was slow. So the build succeeded. There are no errors. You can actually run this, although there are some runtime errors that we haven't gotten to yet. But you can run programs with warnings. But warnings could mean that you could possibly have some runtime errors. For example, let's say that you make up a variable and you assign it a value, but then you forget later on to reassign it a value, or to maybe it's a counter and you forgot to increment the counter. Okay, so it's not going to be an error, it's going to run, but you'll have a runtime error, like the one that you saw when you did loops. Oh no, sorry, I'm getting this class confused. That was a different class. So, for example, if I have a loop and I forget to increment my counter and it's a loop that goes on forever and ever, and an infinite loop, then that would be a runtime error. So you want to look at your warnings. Don't ignore them. So this particular warning says variable sample was never mutated. Consider changing to let constant. Okay, so what that means is you made sample a variable because you put var there. I'm saying you as in like if you had created this, and you printed it, you displayed it to the screen, but nothing ever happened to sample after that. And so if that's the case, it's saying maybe it should be a constant, or maybe you do need to change sample to something else and you just forgot to do that. So that's it might be an important warning. Or it might be that you don't even need sample. Sometimes we define variables that we never even use. And so, oh gosh, let's see here. Just pressed enter. Okay, here we go. Let sample equal sample in a string. So this constant is not going to equal this string in memory. Now we're going to print sample. Then we have another warning that says will never be executed. Okay. And basically what this is saying is that when you run this, the code in here is never, ever, ever going to happen because we have set this to false. So we say if false, do this. Well, this is never going to be false. I'm sorry, this is never going to be true. I'm just going to change it to true. Now it will actually execute the code. And really, this is not really something, it's not really good coding method to put the word true there. Usually you would just want to compare it to something like it's x greater than 10. Yes, then go inside the condition. But this is just an example to show you warnings and errors. So it is why it did this. I want to show you one more thing. Let's say, for example, that let's say that these are, like far away from each other, these two statements. And for some reason, when you get to print, what you see is not what you were expecting. So let's say that sample prints out and you see something else. Maybe there's garbage that gets printed and you're like, well, I wonder what happened to the value in my constant sample or variable if it's a variable. And so something that you can do is if it displays something that it's unexpected, let's say that I made this a variable and then I changed it. Sample equals blah. Okay. If I add a breakpoint, which I think I talked about in the last video, so here I'm going to click on it. I'm going to add a breakpoint, and then what I want to do is I want to step over each line. I want to see sample with the value. I want to see how sample gets blah inside. And you do this when you have really complex code and there's like complex calculations and you want to see each step of the calculation. You can do that with breakpoints. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run my code, and it's going to stop here. The execution will stop at that line. And it's going to show my output here on the right hand side. I think my system is trying to run the program, but it's pretty slow. Try it again. So I can click run here, I can click run there. There we go. Notice here at the bottom how it opened my simulator. So my build was successful. It opened the simulator. It's trying right now to display everything. And this is a simulator for whatever you decide. Remember here on the top left hand side, you can change the simulator to whatever device you want it to use. And we're just going to wait. And notice here at the top it says launching, first time debugging. So I know something's happening. It's just happening a little slow. Attaching to first time debugging. And then I'm waiting. I want it to wait, and I want it to break here. And I'm going to see that here in just a second. I'm going to keep on waiting. As soon as it's actually breaks here, you're going to see these little buttons available. And this button right here is the button that allows me to step over the code. Sorry, so slow. Okay, here we go. Oh, so there's an error here before I get to my break. Let's look at this and then we'll get to my break in just a second, because this gets executed before my other page. So here we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add a break to figure out what's going on. So if you are new to coding, this here is called an array, and an array is a type of variable that can hold multiple elements. So it can hold multiple integers, it can hold multiple doubles, it can hold multiple strings. Here I'm telling the compiler that this variable test array is it's an array of strings, And right now it only has one element. If I wanted to have more elements, I would put a comma. Maybe I put a name in there, James, comma, Joe. And I can put as many strings that I want. I can make this an array of names or whatever it is that I want to make. But right now, I only have one name because I only or one string, and because I only have one string, I can only remove one string. So here I'm trying to remove two of them, and it's saying that there's a fatal error. It cannot remove the first element from an empty collection. So what's happening is that it tries to it removes this first one, and that's fine. But when he gets to remove it again, it's empty. There's nothing else. So there's two things I could do. I could either just delete this line, okay, take it out. Right now what I did is I put a comment in front of it that takes it out so it doesn't get compiled. Or I could add another string here. If I add another string, then it makes this okay. What I'll do is I'll just take this line out and everything will work wonderful. So now I'm going to, I don't want to get back in here in this report. Let's get back to the code. Now what I want to do is I want to run it again. So I'm going to run the code, and it says that there's already an instance running, so I need to stop it first. Forgot to stop it. This is what stops it right there. Here it says that it's launching it. Open my simulator. And then it runs and it says blah, will this line of code be reached? But it never entered my break. Let's see what happened. Let's put a break right here. Just want you to see how this break works. So if I add this break here and I run it again, it should stop there. There we go. Okay, so right now it's stopped here, and it says down here that test array is a string. And then if I click on, now I'm looking at the bottom, my output windows, and I'm going to click on this button that says step over. This steps to the next line, and it says that at that point, oh, I clicked it again, sorry. Let me start again. I went too fast. Okay, so right now it says, okay, test array is a string. That's what I did, I just defined it. I'm going to click it one time. And then notice at the bottom here it says test array has one value. What's the value that it has? It has the value 00. That's the string, one value. Okay, then I'm going to click on it again. It removed the first value, and since it removed it, it tells me that test array has 0 values. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So the break, what it does, it just allows me to look at each line, and I can see what's happening at each line of the code, so I can debug. If you have some complex calculations, you want to add that breakpoint so you can look at each line. I can keep, and I can just go back. It returns to there. I can keep going. no idea where I'm at. And then I can take my breakpoint when I'm done, drag it to the right, hold down your mouse button, drag it to the right, and your breakpoint goes away. Add breakpoint. You can make it unavailable, make it available again, and then get rid of the breakpoint. Okay, so I think those are all the errors that we have. So we saw the runtime error, we saw the which the runtime error is when it's running. There's a bug in your code, but everything runs. Runtime errors can look like infinite loops. They can look like, let's say you're trying to find the average of the grades and the average comes out wrong, or the average is just junk instead of a number, then that's a runtime error. You got an output, but okay. I just said all that completely wrong. Let me backtrack. Okay, runtime error is going to stop the execution of your program. So it has to do with memory problems. There's logical errors. Logical errors are the ones that I was just describing. Logical errors is you make some kind of logic error, like you're supposed to average 5 numbers, but you average 4. So the average you were expecting comes out wrong. Those are logic errors. Maybe you used an and instead of an or, and you got something completely different. Those are logic errors. So you've got logic errors, you've got runtime errors, which just stops, the program is running and all of a sudden, poof, it crashes. We've all experienced that when we run apps that crash. And then we have compiler errors, which is we're compiling and our program doesn't compile successfully, does not build successfully, and we've got to get those bugs out before we actually get something built. Okay, so go ahead and play around with the lab for 1-6 and see if you can find all the errors and run the program on your own.